let's talk about the kind of 4 critical factors in standing out. So I've already mentioned that, like, if you're going to impress that admissions officer assigned to your file, standing out is extremely important. And grades and test scores are only one in a kind of slew of variables that sort of allow you to stand out. So generally speaking, a kind of simplified paradigm of understanding what standing out means in the law school admissions process is as follows. So you sort of have threshold grades and scores, and this is sort of bracketed off for a couple of reasons. One of which is that I sort of think of this as a kind of necessary precondition to be qualified to be admitted. None of the remainders, I think, are necessary in and of themselves. Collectively, they are probably, though, all entirely. Which is to say that you can. It is not enough to just have an application persona if you don't have leadership and diversity, if you don't have direction and fit, so they're sort of jointly and severally necessary. The threshold grades and test scores is where we will begin. They are very important. If anybody tries to tell you that the LSAT or the GPA are not important for law school, they are definitely not telling you the truth. They are more important to law school admissions than the GPA and SAT scores were for college admissions. This is a statistical fact. So you should treat them kind of commensurately. The LSAT is a particularly intimidating test, I always thought, because it was like, several hours of test taking of equal importance to 4 years of grades. Steve's a great guy to talk to you about how to deal with that. But in terms of understanding scores generally, including GPAs, there are always exceptions. You should not expect to be one of them. In fact, generally speaking, I feel that the people who would be most grateful to become an exception are almost always the people who are not. That is to say, like, the people who don't study and do better on test day than they did in, like, practice tests. That's not you. The students who study, like, join these kinds of webinars, who study hard, who work hard, they will invariably do slightly worse on test day than they do when they're practicing. Those are not the people who get lucky in that way. Fundamentally, these qualifications, grades and test scores, they answer the question, can this person succeed in the classroom? And as I mentioned before, both GPA, I mentioned this in respect to the LSAT, but both GPA and the LSAT have predictive value in terms of whether or not a student is likely to succeed in the first year of law school and beyond. So that is kind of a big part of what they're looking at. There's kind of a second tier to this, which is that part of the way that the U.S. News and World Report ranks law schools takes into account admitted students' LSAT scores and GPAs. If they admit too many students with like a lower than average LSAT score GPA, they do risk potentially, diminishing their rank. I've never heard of an admissions office making such explicit calculations on a student by student basis, but I assure you that at the dean level, that is something that they are keeping in the back of their mind. They have this calculated. They have the averages calculated long before the class is fully taking shape. Many applicants with great scores get rejected. Happens all the time. So you should not assume that getting great grades and great test scores are both necessary and sufficient. They are not. Likewise, there are applicants with low scores who get accepted. We once worked with a student who got a 155 on the LSAT and got into Yale Law School. She had an unbelievable GPA, went to a top undergraduate school, had a lot of great work experience, and had done an academic research project with a very famous professor from Yale Law School who liked her so much he walked her letter of recommendation into the admissions office. So it's possible. I've seen it. There were, I've seen sort of these crazy circumstances. Again, don't assume that it's going to be you, but you also shouldn't be so disheartened by like a low GPA or a low LSAT score that you don't bother shooting for it.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.